So thanks a lot. It will be hard now to keep the high standards of the two previous presentations, but I will try. So thanks a lot to Diogo and Gans for this very insightful and inspiring papers on intergenerational mobility. What we will do now is going back to Brazil. Before I can ask you two my questions that I noted down on your papers, we will go back to Brazil and see something that Diogo actually has shown us at the end, namely somehow the long-run effects of conditional cash transfer, namely Bolsa Familia, which in this paper is our laboratory of study to somehow get a sense of the long-run effects of conditional cash transfers in a data-poor environment. So not the one that Diogo is moving in, but in the standard developing country data context that we are usually working in with household surveys. This is the idea of this work, which is joint work with the great Leo Gasparini, which I'm sure many know here in this room, who is the founder and director of SEDLAS, and also Luis Laguinge, who is a PhD student there. So in a nutshell, what do we show and what do we do is to estimate the long-term impacts of this, which is the largest CCT program, at least in Latin America, which is Bolsa Familia, by applying a novel methodology. The methodology in itself is not really novel, but the novel thing is that we connect two different methodologies in a different context to get a long-run effect with data which has commonly been used, but which we can deploy in a bit different way. And you will see this, and I think this might also be helpful for other contexts as well. What we find is a quite clear positive effect on beneficiary children later on their education, but also on labor market outcomes. However, these benefits are not uniformly distributed. There's a very interesting and I think alarming heterogeneity, which we will see in a few slides. No further spoilers so far, and so you have to stay with me to know what these heterogeneities are. So this paper is in the context of, poverty alleviation scheme and especially conditional cash transfers. I don't have to tell you in this room what conditional cash transfers are and what's their motivation, but I can show you what an AI makes as an image, as a picture, if you tell to create a metaphor for what are the long-run benefits of our conditional cash transfers. So that's the way how the AI interprets it. It's pretty interesting. There are books and academic hats and breaking the chains. So this is like, the aim of it, to break the cycle of intergenerational transmission of poverty through immediate cash transfers, but mostly through the human capital formation, right, of children. So the literature has evidenced the short-run benefits of this program. There's a lot of literature, and a lot of people in this room have surely contributed to it. So what now is coming more and more as a question is, what are the long-run benefits and the intergenerational effects on children that were on adults that were beneficiary as children when these CCTs started, for example. So this is what we try to do here. The long-run evidence so far is rather limited so far, because first of all, they are relatively new, we could say, as policy schemes, CCTs, and because estimating such effects is quite data demanding. Okay, so the idea that we had and we tried to develop is to provide a method to estimate these long-run effects based on the information that we have, okay, that we have at our disposal. So to give you an example, so there are basically, to give you an illustration of what we do. Okay, so usually what you would require to measure the long-run effect is that you have a family, which in my slides look differently, but okay, nice. This is a WhatsApp family. In my slides it looked differently. You have some families, and you know from the data who are beneficiaries and who not. Then you follow up the children. In the long run, you have the children as adults in these data. and you know their outcomes, and then you compare these outcomes. Okay, this is like the optimal setup. Now you can do like Diogo and search for novel data sets which allow you somehow maybe to do this. You know, you can open up new data sets, administrative data that opens up. But usually what we have as a situation is, you know, we have some data on the short run benefits, right? Some old data. And we have some data on children, but we have no link. We have no idea who was beneficiary as a child. So the very straightforward or simple step that we try to do is, okay, let's take this data that we have on the short run information, who's beneficiary and not. Let's take this long run data. Let's see which information we have here to predict the beneficiary status in childhood. Okay, that's so simple as it is. And we try to, you know, to develop a bit this in the context of Bolsa Familia, but it can surely be applied also to other countries, and I'm happy to talk about this. So, laboratory, Brazil, Bolsa Familia, I probably don't have to say too much about this. It's a very famous CCT, it has a high coverage, and it is connected to school attendance and health checkups. So what we do with this in this laboratory is a two-step identification strategy, as I told you. So in the first step, basically, the idea is to identify who's treated and who's a control group. Okay, who were the beneficiaries as in childhood, in a context where we don't know it in the data. So we take the PNAD 2014, where we don't know who was beneficiary of the adults that are there, who is beneficiary in their who was beneficiary in their childhood. But what we know is we have some information on their parents given by retrospective information. So we know their education and we know their occupation. We also know some other information, for example, their state of residency, if it was a rural and urban location, when the respondent was 15 years old. So with this information, we go to the PNAD 2006, where we have families and we know if they are beneficiaries or not, and we predict, based on these characteristics, their probability to be in the program. Okay? And then, sorry, we don't predict it here, we measure it here. Yes, thank you. We measure it here and we predict it then for the adults with the information we have about their childhood, okay? So if you want to know about cutoffs and how do we choose the exact predicted probability to be in or out, we can talk about this slide later. I will go to the second step, which is once you have identified who is beneficiary or not, you have somehow look at the time dimension, okay? Because the step that we apply afterwards, once we have identified beneficiaries and not, we apply a difference in difference approach to estimate actually the causal effect of the program. And the time dimension in this case is given by the age cutoff of the program. And this is pretty interesting because the slide we have seen very quickly at the end in the August presentation, we will see something very similar here, also with very similar effects. So the age cutoff defines somehow who benefited from it and who not. In the treatment group, and this is given by age in the year when Bolsa Familia started. Okay, some children were too old, so the family could benefit from it, and some children were in the age where they could benefit from it. Okay, so this is based on a paper I did with previously with Miguel Niño Zarazua, who was a UNU-WIDER employee at that time, and this is inspired by the methodology we applied at that times. So now we have all ingredients for a difference in difference setup. We know who's treated or who should be treated, have been treated in childhood or not, given on the predicted probability to have been a beneficiary in childhood. We know when is post-treatment and pre-treatment, namely the cohorts after 1984 are those that that should have benefited from Bolsa Familia in the treated group, and we have some control variables for contemporaneous control. So these are the results if you look at the impact of Bolsa Familia in the long run. So we see here is the average estimate. and here like the dynamic component by cohorts. So on average, the effect is 1 year of schooling. So once they are adult, these children have 1 year of schooling more on average, and around $250. Okay, that's the impact of the cohort, and it also makes sense that this effect is stronger with more exposure to the program. So for more younger cohorts. Now, we look at, and we look at some robustness. We do the typical pre-trend test, placebo test, dynamic estimates, and everything points in the same direction. Now, I will come to the heterogeneities, which are not so remarkable in the case of men and women. So they seem to have benefited both in absolute and relative terms quite similarly from the program in the long run. However, where we find an interesting and alarming heterogeneity is if we observe the difference between Afro-American and non-Afro-American individuals. We have, let's say, similar, maybe even higher for Afro-American effect on education. However, once we look at income, we do find the average effect that we found before for non-Afro-American individuals, but we found nothing, so zero, for Afro-American individuals, despite of the effect on years of schooling. And it would be interesting to discuss about this, but this is also something that we had found in the paper with Miguel, where we analyzed Chile Solidario and did the same similar analysis on Chile Solidario. We found this same effect for indigenous people. So, you know, there might be some structural barriers that we have really to discuss that make that, you know, in the case of education, there is something, but then on the labor market, other dynamics play a role. Okay. So, what else will we do? We look at some mechanisms, but I think I will skip this here and go to our conclusions. Maybe just to mention that we analyze human capital formation in the sense of completing some degree. So not only the accumulation of years of schooling, but also completing primary, completing secondary, completing tertiary. And, well, now I'm already talking about it. I can also show the results. We find a positive effect on the likelihood to complete primary education, also one on the likelihood to complete secondary education, but nothing on the effect of completing tertiary education. Yes, and now, and we also look at productivity by sectors, but I will skip this due to time. I'm happy to talk about this, and I will go to our conclusions. So, what are the long-run effects of Bolsa Familia as we measure it here in this context? So, positive is, of course, the average increase in years of schooling, around 1 year, and $250. It's also an increase in the probability of completing formal education. There is a shift to higher productivity sectors, which was in the slide that I haven't shown you. And also a finding that I haven't shown you is that there is a significant drop by 4 percentage points of these children in adulthood to receive themselves social assistance. Okay, so it seems to somehow break the intergenerational cycle of poverty. However, big minus, we have seen for African American individuals in Brazil, this increase in schooling is somehow not translated to the labor market. And this is something that we really have to discuss and investigate more in the future. So thanks a lot for your attention. Happy to discuss this later.